The Chowchilla Kidnapping, 1976, buried alive. Hit that subscribe button if you think you've heard every crazy crime story, because this one will make you question what people are truly capable of. The July sun beat down on Chowchilla, California, turning the small farming town into a shimmering mirage. The yellow school bus rumbled down the dusty country road, its laughter echoing through the fields. 26 children, aged between 5 and 14, were headed home from summer school. Their driver, 55-year-old Ed Ray, a man with kind eyes and calloused hands, kept one arm out the window, steering through the heat waves. It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon, until a van blocked the road. At first, Ed thought it had broken down, but when 3 masked men stepped out, holding guns, time seemed to stop. The children froze. A boy in the front seat whispered, "Is this a joke?" It wasn't. The men climbed aboard, their faces hidden behind nylon stockings. One of them spoke calmly, almost rehearsed. "Don't scream, don't run, nobody gets hurt if you listen." Ed Ray's hands trembled as one of the kidnappers took the wheel. The bus veered off the road, into the back roads of the Central Valley, swallowed by orchards and silence. Hours passed. The air inside grew thick with fear and sweat. One child tried to cry quietly. Another whispered prayers under her breath. After what felt like forever, the bus stopped in a dry riverbed. The men forced everyone into 2 vans, their windows blacked out, the interiors sweltering like ovens. The children were terrified, whispering each other's names to stay calm in the darkness. Miles away, panic spread through Chowchilla. Parents gathered outside the school, demanding answers. Police were called. Helicopters circled the farmlands, but the yellow bus had vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, deep in the countryside, when the last child emerged, Ed Ray looked back at the dark hole that had almost become their grave. He whispered, "No more. 16 hours underground, 27 survivors." But when police arrived, there was one burning question left unanswered. Where were the kidnappers? Because the quarry was empty, and the men who buried them had vanished. The vanishing millionaires. If you thought escaping the grave was the end, think again, because the real nightmare was only beginning. Subscribe now, before we dig deeper into what came next. By the time dawn broke over Chowchilla, the entire town was awake. Parents clung to their children, crying in disbelief as news crews swarmed the scene. 26 kids and their bus driver, alive after being buried underground for 16 hours. It sounded impossible, but the evidence was right there. The half-buried moving van, the empty quarry, and claw marks in the dirt where they'd fought their way out. The question on everyone's mind was simple: who would do this? Detectives from the FBI and California Highway Patrol arrived within hours. They scoured the site. Tire tracks, footprints, even a torn scrap of a map with grease stains. Someone had planned this meticulously. The van had been buried deep, reinforced with beams, stocked with food and water. This wasn't random. It was engineered. The investigators worked around the clock. They traced the moving truck's registration, which led to a chilling clue. It was purchased under a fake name, but the paperwork connected to a wealthy San Francisco family, the Woods. Frederick Woods IV, 24 years old, son of a prominent businessman who owned the quarry itself. He wasn't just some desperate criminal. He was a privileged young man with access to heavy equipment and money. When the FBI raided his family's estate, they found notes, diagrams, and a blueprint of the burl-eyed truck. It was a ransom plot. Bold, calculated, and utterly reckless. But Frederick wasn't alone. 2 brothers, James and Richard Schoenfeld, were his partners. The 3 of them had grown up surrounded by wealth and entitlement. But behind the luxury was something darker: arrogance, boredom, and a fascination with the perfect crime. They believed no one would ever suspect rich kids. Investigators soon discovered their plan had one fatal flaw: timing. After burying the busload of victims, the kidnappers had gone to sleep, waiting until nightfall to make their ransom call. But by the time they woke up, the phone lines were jammed with news of the miraculous escape. The story had exploded across America. Every TV network, every radio station, the entire nation was talking about the Chowchilla miracle. By the time they tried to demand ransom, it was too late. The FBI already knew their names. For days, the fugitives vanished into California's back roads. Their faces were plastered on every newspaper, their vehicles tracked across counties. Then, a tip came in. One of the Schoenfeld brothers had called his father, begging for help. The line was traced. The FBI surrounded a small property near Menlo Park. Inside, they found James and Richard, exhausted and terrified. They surrendered without a fight. But Frederick Woods was gone. His room was stripped clean, and his car was missing. For 8 long days, America held its breath. The manhunt stretched from California to Canada. The FBI believed Woods had fled north, using his father's money and connections. Agents raided storage units, properties, even boats tied to the Woods estate. One officer said, "It's like chasing a ghost with a credit card." Then came the break. A car abandoned near a lake house in rural California. The smell of gasoline, cigarette butts, and stale air filled the air when Agent E.S. broke in. They found him asleep under a pile of blankets, a revolver beside him, and stacks of stolen cash. Frederick Woods was arrested without resistance. When they questioned him, his calm demeanor unsettled everyone in the room. He didn't cry, he didn't beg. He just said, "We were just trying to get rich quick. It wasn't supposed to go that far." The investigators stared at him in disbelief. 26 children, traumatized for life, and he called it a mistake. The public's outrage was immediate. Parents demanded justice. The state wanted life sentences. But when the trial began in 1977, what followed was almost as shocking as the crime itself. Because the defense argued something unthinkable, no one was physically harmed. Their lawyers pushed for leniency, citing the kidnappers' wealthy backgrounds, their remorse, their youth. It infuriated the nation. People saw privilege at work, rich men trying to buy their way out of a grave crime. But justice, for once, didn't bend. The verdict came down. Guilty on 27 counts of kidnapping with ransom and bodily harm. All 3 were sentenced to life in prison without parole. Yet even behind bars, whispers began to spread. Letters intercepted, secret visits, a pattern of manipulation and wealth protecting the guilty. And in the years to come, the story would twist once more, because one of them wouldn't stay locked away forever. The price of survival. If you think justice always means closure, think again. What happened after the Chowchilla kidnapping will leave you speechless. Subscribe before the next story buries you in truth. For the survivors, the nightmare didn't end when they climbed out of that underground prison. It began there. The children, now local heroes, were sent home to cheering crowds and flashing cameras. But behind the smiles were sleepless nights, panic attacks, and nightmares filled with dirt walls and muffled cries. Many of them refused to ride school buses again. Some couldn't sleep without a light on. Their driver, Ed Ray, the EMG, and who helped save them, quietly carried the weight of their trauma until his death decades later. The town of Chowchilla tried to move on, but the scar never faded. Parents still told their children, "Don't talk to strangers," and everyone locked their doors before sunset. The fear became part of the soil itself. Meanwhile, in prison, the 3 kidnappers, Frederick Woods, James Schoenfeld, and Richard Schoenfeld, lived lives far different from what anyone expected. At first, the nation was satisfied. Justice had been served. But behind the concrete walls, money whispered louder than guilt. Frederick Woods, ever the schemer, started using his family's fortune to make prison life comfortable. He owned stock, ran businesses from behind bars, and even had a cell filled with luxuries, from gourmet food to computers. One officer once said, "He lived better in prison than most people do outside." Over the years, all three men began appealing their sentences. Their lawyers argued they'd shown remorse, that they'd behaved well in prison. The legal battles dragged on for decades. Each hearing reopened old wounds for the victims, forcing them to relive the horror. In 1980, something unthinkable happened. The Schoenfeld brothers were granted parole. After serving only a fraction of their sentences, they walked out of prison, free men. James became deeply religious. Richard tried to disappear into anonymity, but the families of the victims felt betrayed. One of the mothers told reporters, "They buried my child alive. You don't get to move on from that." Frederick Woods remained behind bars. For a while, he kept filing petitions one after another, arguing he was a changed man. But every time his name came up, survivors flooded the hearings, now grown adults, begging the board to keep him locked up. Then came 2022. 46 years after the crime that shocked America, Woods stood before the parole board one last time. He was in his 70s, gray-haired, soft-spoken. He called the kidnapping a terrible mistake of youth. He apologized to the victims, saying he'd spent his life reflecting on the pain he caused. Despite public outrage, the board approved his release. When the news broke, the same children who had once clawed through the dirt as kids now sat watching the headlines as adults, shaking their heads in disbelief. Some said they forgave him. Others said forgiveness was impossible. But one thing was certain: none of them had ever truly escaped that truck. In the years that followed, the Chowchilla Kidnapping remained one of the most bizarre and haunting crimes in American history. A story not of murder, but of psychological survival. A reminder that monsters don't always hide in shadows. Sometimes, they come from the very top of society. The field where the bus vanished is empty now, just grass and wind. But those who lived through it say, sometimes at night, when the world goes silent, they can still hear the sound of children whispering in the dark, trying to dig their way toward the light. Because in Chowchilla, California, some nightmares never stay buried. If you thought this story was unbelievable, wait until you hear what happened next. Hit subscribe, tap like, and turn on the bell. Because the next crime we uncover will make the Chowchilla case look like a warning no one listened to. Until then, stay curious, stay alert, and never stop looking beneath the surface.